Hello, FewCandy here, and welcome back to City Skylines 2 with the third part of our three-part series of early access gameplay. Now, yes, you will see, this is my city at level 12, large city. I am going to do this episode slightly differently to what we've done before. So because we're playing on the latest version of the build, there are constant updates to it, and with that has caused me a few issues in recording, so I haven't actually got any usable footage, unfortunately, of me building out this city. So instead today we're just going to absolutely deep dive into the assets, the industry, the production chains, the different game mechanics when it comes to things like districts and signature buildings. And then we can come back to building an actual city once the embargo lifts. So the whole process of building this city has been a massive learning curve compared to CS1. So I think a lot of people who are new to City Skylines 2 will probably be at an advantage because you won't be looking at it like, that's how I did it in CS1. Like the road tools and things are slightly different, a lot the same, but slightly different, and obviously a big upgrade. So if we do just start with the road tools, you can see I've put in this key along here, and it was pretty finicky, I won't lie, to get in. You kind of have to do a technique of smoothing off the ground to get rid of the water underneath the key and on top of it. Make sure everything is super flat, and then you can get it in quite nicely. So this took an awful long time to do to get this key in around our downtown here. Again, hence why I have done it off camera. And then if we also just make a quick note on highways, oh, so smooth. I've said this before, but the connections into and out of the highways for the slip roads is just beautiful. Like you can see here, it's just super smooth. When you're connecting a road into another road, you can do it like with ease. You don't have to snap into one point. You can kind of collect it at a distance, which is most noticeable, I think, on rail tracks especially. Like you'll see with our subway tracks here, we can connect it in quite far down the track and not like just sort of directly in like we had on CS1. So the connections are nice and long and nice and smooth. So to start off with, I am just going to talk quickly about seasons, because even though they told us that we were not getting full trees before release, we've now got full trees. This is like the best news I think I've had. Like, it's so pretty seeing these autumnal colours throughout your city. However, they kind of disappear relatively quickly and they go to like this grey winter tree. So the leaves don't actually fall off the trees that have turned yellow, which is kind of odd, and I hope that they do update that and change that. And then in winter, it makes everything look even more grey. Like we talked about the bleak midwinter last time. That's even more pronounced now with the fact that the trees are grey. However, they do get snow on top of them in winter time, so that is pretty cool, but you kind of have to zoom in pretty far to see it. As soon as you zoom out, you kind of get this big grey mess again. So, like, there's some work, I think, still to be done on that, but yes, we've got full trees. Big news. That is absolutely the biggest news from the latest update in the game. And one other little change that I do just want to highlight here, which is quite a silly change, honestly, in my opinion, is when you look at these numbers now, you're not actually seeing the difference per hour, you're just seeing this little arrow. I do not get the point in this at all. Like, they said that it wasn't important how much money you were making or losing. That's so not true. Like, it's a big difference between losing £1 an hour and losing 200 grand an hour, which is easily possible in this game. However, we've also got some interesting dynamics here. So I've been consistently losing money, yet my budget has doubled while I've been sat waiting for the simulation to get through to spring like we are now, so that I didn't have to film in winter again, which took an awful long time, I will say. To fast forward through a day on 3 times simulation speed really does take a good chunk of time. It's not a quick thing you can do to get out of seasons if you don't want to play in them. So again, my hope is that they do introduce something which means you can either pick what season you play in or turn off seasons altogether. I'm sure someone will bring a mod out for that if they don't put that into the game. I think, honestly, the reason why they've done that is because it's possible to make absolutely ridiculous sums of money in this game, and it's also possible to make ridiculous sums of money an hour and also lose it, as you can see, like we're losing it here at the moment. Which again kind of happened with the latest update. I was making about 300-400 grand an hour. The game updated and now I'm losing, so I don't know if that's a bug and it will be fixed before release, but yeah, our budget's going up anyway. So either way, honestly, making money in this game is not hard. It is not a challenge. That is not where the challenge lies in this game, so those hoping for that, unfortunately, that's just not the case. But equally, like the way I like to play, I quite like having a big budget so you can do what you want. So one other thing to note is we do now also have nighttime ready to show you, and it's looking absolutely marvellous. Like, the atmosphere that it brings is super cool. Like, I would never build like this, honestly, because it's impossible to see anything. But it really is ultra cool. Like you'll see here, we've actually got blue flashing lights on our ambulances coming out of here. Yes, yes, yes. The buildings look really quite amazing at night time in general. And you can see here as well with our level crossing on our train line. Oh, they stopped coming down. I'm not sure why, but they do have little red flashing lights on it. So like all these lights going off is just super cool. Like we've actually got just great atmosphere at night time. Like you can see the green on the petrol pumps here. Like the detail on the assets really is amazing. And the atmosphere that nighttime brings, like I said, is just awesome. Like I absolutely love it. Like you can see down here from street level, just the detail on this building. And I'm only currently actually playing in 2K. So with 4K, that would be even better. The night sky needs some work. It looks like someone's come in with paint, honestly, and just like dabbed some little dots everywhere. It's a little odd, and it also doesn't really move too much, which is kind of weird, I think. But the buildings are incredible. I wish pedestrian pathways had lights because they don't currently, which means any kind of like parks and things like that are pretty dark in night time. Same goes for this bridge as well. Like it's slightly underwhelming. I'd wish there was some lights on the archways and things like that to kind of make it really stand out. But like you've got the little red dot on the radio tower back there. It's really cool. The mountains are definitely too bright as well, so there's some kind of like balancing things to make it perfect, I would say, but we finally get nighttime we can actually look at, so I'm super pleased with that. And you can almost see in like the little rooms down here on the right hand side as well. Really nice touches. So yes, nighttime, a big win. One other thing I would like to mention quickly as well, because based on a comment from a viewer, they said they'd like to see random tree rotation. So like, let's have a little look at this older. If we right click with our mouse, we can actually rotate it to put it in, which is actually super duper nice indeed. And also when you put them in, you will see, if we zoom right in, they are actually rotated. So they're not all on the rotation, like they're, you know, exactly the same as we had in Cities 1. So that's a big improvement there. And also with the tree brush, like let me just put down a few different random trees in here. There is a button here that says remove only matching type. If you turn that off, and right click with your brush, you can actually remove all types of trees. So just to flag that that does actually exist, because I thought it didn't initially, but there we go. So yeah, if we just have a little look at the city as a whole, you can see we're up to 45,000 population. So we have increased a lot to get up to level 12. And I've added in this entire section essentially to the left-hand side of the main highway here. So the whole thing is actually on layers. Like I've tried to kind of respect the topography as much as possible, besides flattening out the mountains which actually existed here beforehand. But we are on quite a large slope and there's lots of different layers to kind of enjoy within this. So if we have a look over here, we've got this retaining wall on the rail line here, and we come across to this suburb which is higher up. So you can kind of like look down on the downtown from some of these higher up bits, which I really quite enjoy, with the raised highway going across the middle of it too. Same goes for over this side, lots of layers kind of going down the hill with the high density assets in the front here. And I'm really enjoying this. I'm actually really enjoying building on slopey terrain, ironically, in this game. Like it is quite challenging. And you do get things like this with the kind of texture showing through all over the place, which is not ideal. I'm not too sure what those random towers are. I don't think I intended to put them there, but that is what it is. But yeah, you do get like bumpy bits like this if you zone too close together that you can't smooth out ultimately. But in particular, the wall-to-wall houses that you can see up here, they do work really nicely on a little slope. Like it's not too bad. And the fact that the low density houses are all relatively narrow assets actually helps for building on a slope as well. If they were super wide, then the flattening out would be a little bit awkward. And actually you can see the terrain around them, it only kind of automatically flattens the bit around the building. Like the hedges and things kind of do conform to the terrain and work with the terrain. So it's not too bad at all building on slopey land. One area where it does cause me a bit of trouble though is with these vegetable farms. The vegetable farms do get these greenhouses that spawn randomly in the field. Again, I'm not going to get started on that now. It is only the grain fields and the cotton fields that have no buildings in them at all, so they're the ones you probably want to use most of. With the vegetable farms, yeah, when you get these spawning in, you can see here they push up the terrain around it. So you end up with these huge like lumps and bumps in your fields if you do them on slopes, so that's a little bit disappointing. With the grain fields, obviously you don't get that, so they do look a lot better on slopey land. So if we just take a look at some of the actual assets now, in terms of the high density, which is obviously what we've unlocked since last time, we've got European high density tower blocks here, so the residential. And this is a level 2 building. Like, it's all right. It's very grey. That's the only thing I think about a lot of these tower blocks. Like, this is the same, a European high density residential. Same as over here, we've got 2 of the same there. Another little one here. So the good thing I think about these is the larger the block size that you zone in, the taller the tower ultimately. So you can do some much more refined, smaller buildings like this one. They're at different heights, and that's going to give you really nice layers throughout your downtown. So I really, really like that effect. And it is much more realistic in terms of the population. Like you can see here, we've got 180 households. And for some reason as well, we do literally have a list of all 180 households here. So we can click on any one of them and find out who is living there and what their wealth is like. It's interesting. We can click on that exact person if we wanted to. I think that is taking up a lot of the simulation power, I won't lie, and I don't know how often anyone would realistically look at that. Yes, for interest every now and then, but as a core kind of part of the game, it doesn't really appeal to me. But the high density assets do look nice, like in particular this one here. I think some of the smaller buildings actually look nicer than the larger ones. If I come round to this little block here, we've actually got, yes, so these are North American high density over on this side. It's very, very white looking building there. I'm not sure what that's about. But yeah, again, like they look really, really nice. And when you zone in smaller sizes, you get these smaller size of buildings. I think the one criticism is at the moment, obviously for base games, so we've got to bear that in mind, is it's not a massive variety in the actual assets. So like these 2 are the same size, we've got the same asset in. These 2 are the same size, they've got the same asset in, etc, etc. So you kind of have to be prepared to manually zone in lots of little small squares to get some variation in height and variation in the assets, because otherwise, the danger is when you mass zone, you just end up with loads of buildings the same size and the same height. So actually having non-straight uniform grids, how I've got here, kind of lends itself to having various different building sizes, and therefore we get these kind of variations in height, which I really like. So like this is a big one on the end here. Again, it's very, very grey. When we zoom in on the buildings, there's such lovely detail. Like you can literally see inside these windows and see people's bedrooms, and like obviously you can't see the Sims moving around, but the reflections are a million times better than we had in CS1. And just in terms of textures, like let's zoom right in on this. This is an American medium density apartment block. Look at the brickwork. Like, so when you zoom in, it's really, really there, and it looks super duper nice. Like, I can't really commend the assets enough. And these are kind of the tallest ones that you get really from residential. I haven't got any that have actually leveled up to level 5 yet. So building leveling takes a lot longer than in CS1. So you kind of have to be prepared for changes there. But this is a European high density building, kind of the maximum zone size that you can really get to it. And it kind of sits nicely in the skyline, I think. Like, it's definitely got stature. And yeah, like I said, it's super cool to kind of integrate it with smaller zoning sizes around it and different types as well. So actually I've found mixing up European and American different styles has given quite a nice variation across the city. So we've got a bit more American over here and much more European this side. Although it's not like tangibly noticeable, the different styles in building, I wouldn't say, apart from the mixed density ultimately. So the mixed density are absolutely some of my favourite buildings. Working these in amongst your towers really gives to that kind of like bulky city vibe. And if we zoom right in on this, let's actually just get rid of the UI so we haven't got that blue outline. Look at the brickwork, like it's awesome. We've got little like fans and AC units on the outside of the buildings. We've got lights on the front. We've got all this lovely tiling around the front as well. I wish we had that to place in the game. We've even got like little painted symbols on the shop here. And we've got shop late. The signage on the shops is much better than it was previously. We've got plastic hold here, and you can really see, like, I don't know if it's visible on YouTube and how much it will compress it. You can really see the detail work on the plaster. If I go even closer, maybe that'll be more apparent to you. But it really is exceptional. Like, there's even little kind of like nicks in the things around the window frame. Like, if you're going to look this closely at assets, it's an absolute delight, I would say. And just in terms of the mixed density, I mean, very similar. The smaller zone size you do, the smaller height the buildings will be that you get in. So these ones are quite a lot shorter than the previous ones that we were looking at. Again, they've got just as much detail on, but yeah, changing up your zoning size is really going to help to add variation. This is actually two different assets which are really nicely spawned into next to each other. So we almost get like a little bit of a natural fusing going on here. And I can't wait to have a version of Find It, which will hopefully come shortly after release, so that we can have access to actually choosing and plopping some of these assets ourselves. Now, high density commercial is probably where it falls down a little bit for me. So these are European high density commercial. I don't like them. I think this is going to be like my pet hate asset, like the low density commercial and some of the high, to be fair, in City Skylines 1. Like, these just don't look very good, in my opinion. And we've got a lot of these kind of like modern buildings that crop up across the place. So like this one, you'll see here, this is a bit of high density commercial along this street here. Very blocky. It's a very particular style, these buildings. And I think that's probably like my main issue, is actually like I didn't really like the commercial in Cities 1. I think they sort of missed the mark a little bit in Cities 2 as well. We don't have any of those kind of low density, really small little coffee shops like the Catfish Cafe springs to mind from Cities 1. Like, we just don't have those anymore. Even low density commercial is quite blocky, and then high is also very blocky. You don't really get any tower blocks that I've seen so far with high density commercial. It's all kind of this sort of medium density height. So it mixes in pretty well with the mixed use buildings, but also in amongst your skyscrapers is a nice effect too. So yeah, you can see a bit more of the high density commercial here. And yeah, the signage on them actually light up, which is super cool, but they're just quite uninspiring, I think. In terms of office high density, my one thought is honestly they're very, very grey. So like this building here is probably one of the taller office high density buildings. This is also office here, this one, which is the same asset with a slightly different colour variation. So that similar kind of like texture overlay change happens with all the high density buildings as well. So you'll see this little asset, for example, here in numerous different colour variations across the city. And these are some of the smaller office zone blocks over here. And again, like, these are actually quite nice. I quite enjoy these. The textures on them, as per all of the assets, are incredible. We've even got things like porches and little props outside. Decent signage, like it's not splattered in signage. I'd say that's actually the same. One credit to the high density commercial as well. They're not splattered in signage either. And it's also appropriate. So Lecto Electronics, you know, a lot of these buildings are making electronics or software or media or that kind of product. So it works really nicely in the city. And yeah, some nice variations in the buildings here for some of the slightly smaller office blocks. This is another one over here, this tower as well, like a really, really nice asset. Just one little sign on the top. Techo mat. Again, signage is super cool. But yeah, they're nice assets. They're nice assets. I just think some of the bigger ones are very, very grey and washed out. And they also have a bit of an issue where when you zoom out far enough, they can kind of go see-through some of them, which is hopefully, again, a bug that will be fixed. So the row houses do also upgrade into some quite nice designs. Like, I really like this little row here where there's different colours, variations coming in. And for example, here on our waterfront, we've got different styles, and these are actually all level 4. So there are different variations of level 4 with the wall-to-wall assets here. So yeah, I really like those. Really like those. And again, the population kind of is realistic for this. I guess you could kind of say for some of these townhouses, it could just be a single family. But here we've got 5 households in this, and you can see all 5 households again there. We've got 1 pet as well. So just a note on zoning sizes, which I know was asked for in the comments, a little bit of a deeper look at that. The interesting thing is, unlike Cities 1, you cannot zone any 1x1 buildings in any type at all. There are no assets that spawn in. So if you just leave a single block, you're not going to get anything in. If we just take a little look at low density residential to start off with, there are no buildings which are 1 wide at all, even if you go back any further. Of course, the row to row houses, they only come in 1 width. So you could do 1x2, 1x3, 1x4, etc. And all of the assets are going to spawn in like that. So even if you zone a 6x6 block, you're going to get 6 buildings with 1 square in width and various different depths, actually. So it doesn't always come in 6 deep. So you do have to do a little bit of deletion to manually kind of change these. But with the low density, you'll see here, I'm doing the various different types of buildings, all 2 wide. So you can go up to 4 wide, I think, with low density residential. I don't think I've seen an asset that is 5 blocks wide. So that's basically as wide as you can get it. And then you can do any depth from 2 upwards. But you can see here for the low density, we actually get the same asset for the one that is 2x2 and 2x3, but you get various different props added on and a larger backyard ultimately in the larger one. And some of the props are a little bit dodgy, like I don't know what that is meant to be. Yeah, but there's some nice props, like the little table and chair set, the wheelie bin, like the washing line, like things are nice in there. And the little garden sheds are even really nicely detailed with the brick textures in there. So that's a slightly larger version with the greenhouse in the back. And then if we go to the ones that are 2x4s and 2x5 deep, again, it's the same asset that comes in, it's just a bigger garden. And actually in these, we don't have fences, interestingly, on the back, which is, yeah, slightly odd. Like we get those on the smaller assets, but not on the larger ones. Consistently, at least. I think there are some which will come in with that hedge at the back. And again, the hedge is a bit untextured, but again, I think that's something that they are working on, hopefully. But there's a kind of selection of different assets, and you'll get one of those with a larger backyard ultimately. And the assets do change as they level up as well. For the row houses, it's essentially the same thing. So we have actually got a bit of slight variation in the building that's come in. But any of the really narrow ones, so the 1x2s don't get a backyard. The 1x5s, I think, are actually the nicest assets with the fence in the back. You go up to 1x6 and they get that little like platform in the back, but no fence around it. So the 1x5 is definitely my favourite asset for these. Although the 1x3 is quite nice as well, because there's not really a backyard. You could put a little narrow streetway behind it and it would kind of back out onto that, which would look pretty cool, I think, indeed. But that's the sort of variation in the zoning sizes that you get for assets. And like I mentioned with the high density ones, it's very much a case of the bigger you get, the taller the tower you get, but nothing that's one wide unless it is the row house. So let's take a little look at districts. And the district tool is really cool. It's like a massive improvement to Cities 1. You can literally just create it like you create your zoned industry areas, just very simply like this. If you don't want a district as well, you can click on it here and then you can just say delete. So it's like super simple. So we can actually edit them if we come in here as well. We just drag some of these points out, or you can just drag along the line to extend the district if you want to. So it's super simple to use. And then when it comes to districts, there's a few cool features. So you do get these policies. So in all of the downtown area, I have added roadside parking fee, for example, and you can adjust that here to try and discourage people from parking on the roadside. It honestly doesn't seem to work. I've whacked it up to the maximum before and you still get people parking on the road and not in car parks. Although you will see here, if I zoom right in, my car parks are, apart from this one that's burned down, a lot busier than they were previously. So we are getting people in the car parks now that we've kind of messed around with that and also taken the parking off a lot of these roads around here. Kind of kept it on in strategic places, but off a lot of the main roads through the downtown. Put on the parking fee, and yeah, that'll keep them out. There's a few other policies to be had. So fuel burning vehicles forbidden from entering. So yeah, that's a nice one. Help the environment. Citizens are required to pay attention to their use of electronic devices, and electricity consumption is reduced by 5%. So this doesn't seem to actually have an effect on the budget. So previously in Cities 1, if you had this, you would have had to spend a little bit more per household, or the taxes would kind of be reduced. Ultimately, the costs would be more. So all this does is just reduce your energy consumption with no other kind of consequence to it, which is like a little bit weird, I think. Gated community is kind of cool, so it forbids anyone else from entering it. You don't get gates in your community, so there's nothing visual about this at all. It simply just says other people can't drive into that area. Heavy traffic ban is the same as Cities 1, and we've also got recycling as well. So they're encouraged to recycling, and it will reduce the amount of resources, but decrease free time. I don't know like how much attention I'm going to be paying to each individual sim and how much free time they have. So for me, that doesn't really matter. And then there's also speed bumps as well, which reduces the speed of vehicles driving within the district. I quite like this. Like, that's kind of cool. So you could do a gated community with speed bumps and have people driving around super slow. But that's all the policies that you get. And then we do also have city-wide policies. So if you click on this button here, this is also really useful. Gives you a little bit more information about demand. I'll come back to that in just a second. But if we go to city policies, there are a few here. So taxi minimum fare, for example, that we've got on. Hey, why don't we just whack that up a bit? Let's say that's like $25. We'll put that somewhere in the middle. You can go right up to $50 minimum fare. Probably a little bit harsh, but I want to try and encourage people to use the public transit and not taxis. So we have this pre-release program as well, where prisoners are enrolled in educational programs before release, which helps them integrate back into society and reduces the likelihood of committing crimes again. So if you have a crime problem, maybe you'd want to do that. Again, there's no like financial penalty for it, which I think is kind of weird. Like you could put all of these on and it's not really going to affect your city budget. High-speed highways, that's kind of cool. You could increase city attractiveness, but that increases the crime rate around tourist attractions as well. And then we've got advanced pollution management. So that reduces the air and ground pollution, but it produces more garbage. I don't have a problem with garbage, so I'm going to stick that on actually and see how we do with that. So yeah, there's not that many policies really that you can apply, and I don't think any at the moment that are game changing, but I think what will be interesting is to see what happens when the DLCs are released and what policies we get alongside those, because we're bound to get some cool stuff, I think, with those. Now, just back on demand, this is very interesting. So if we look at our chirper feed, I quite often get this, which is so many open jobs and so few workers, but we have absolutely no residential demand at the moment at all. So there is apparently an abundance of availability of jobs, yet we're getting huge demand for industry and office and commercial. Now the other thing with this is as well, if I look across the city, there is a vast number of not enough customer warnings on our commercial too. We've also got a lot of high rent on the residential, which I think is just about land value really around them and like the facilities we're putting in, but I just want to give everyone nice facilities, right? But these warnings up here are not enough customers, and it's kind of good as well. You can hover over these warnings in the distance and see what they are. So we don't have enough customers, but we don't have any residential demand. And we've got like massive demand for industry. So I'm confused by this. The demand doesn't make sense, but based on the warnings that we're getting in the city and the pop-ups that we're getting as well. We also just go to the population tab. So you can see here, we've got 9% unemployment, but there is plenty more jobs than there are employed people. So yeah, that's interesting as well. They're just not getting to the jobs. We've got pretty decent public transit as well, which I'll talk about a little bit later on across the city. So to me, the demands are very confusing. I won't lie. I haven't fully got to grips to understand this game yet, to understand where they are actually coming from. Because we don't need jobs, so why do we need industry and production? We haven't got any commercial like screaming of lack of goods or anything like that. We've also got commercial complaining of not enough customers, so why would we need commercial? It's a little bit confusing coming from a city's one brain. I'm sure there'll be an explanation for it. Honestly, to me, a lot of the simulation and the production chains and the management are nonsensical, honestly. So again, with the money, like we've gone up in budget since we started this episode, yet we're consistently losing money per hour. And you can see that here as well. We're losing 2 million on a monthly basis. So why is that budget going up? I've no idea. But anyway, regardless of that, which I'm sure is probably a bug, if we go back to the production tab as well, I've tried to do a lot of control with the taxation. I've been playing around with these a lot since our petrochemical deficit in the last episode, and it really hasn't had an effect on any of these. Yeah, the petrochemicals is now massively in the plus because I do have oil production, as you will see here. Now, the reason why this was confusing before is because buildings should have been importing oil, but they weren't. So we just didn't have any industry making petrochemicals, even though the demand was there from commercial. And that wasn't the case for other goods, so we didn't have an ore mine in or a coal mine in at that stage either, yet we were somehow still getting those goods through to industry and having industry that developed that was creating those products. So in all, honestly, this is completely random. Like as well, I have reduced taxes on electronics to try and get more of that production in because we've got a big deficit. That's not happening at all. So it's bizarre to say the least, and I think it's going to take some kind of like wizard to actually figure out how it works, or it is just a case of it actually doesn't mean anything at all. Speaking of industry as well, so I have got in 2 oil fields over here. This one's not at a great efficiency. This one's much better. And you can see with that efficiency, we've got lots more random things spawning in our horrendous oil textured field. This does not make sense as oil industry to me. I really, really wish they'd change this mechanic. Like, I get out the drawing a drawable area, but an oil field does not look like this whatsoever. Like, we've got super realistic assets which look incredible, and then we've got this for industry is a massive disappointment. Same goes for coal. So we've got coal here. I haven't had any random buildings spawning in it in that. And then we've also got an ore mine over here, which again just has this like one thing spawned in the middle of the field. Like, I really strongly dislike this. And we've also got another, yeah, that's ore over here. And I think we've got stone in this one. And again, with these, we just get this massive drill in the middle of a field and then a little yellow digger driving around it. Yeah, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan, honestly. The drawable fields idea is super clever. I think it's been executed entirely wrongly, honestly. Landfill is super cool. Like, look at this filling up. Like, it actually fills up over time. And there's also a ton of props, which I would absolutely love access to. Look at all these trash props. They're sitting at the top here. In fact, like, look over here. There's even like a pile of boxes with some cloth or something, a tarp over the top of it. But I desperately, desperately want access to these props because, yeah, it's cool. There's a barrel over there, some bin bags. They've actually gone to the effort and time of putting in these amazing textured props and we just don't have access to them, which is highly disappointing. That being said, the landfill looks really freaking cool when it fills up. Like, I absolutely love this. The actual garbage processing facility itself looks really cool as well. Like, you've got this little kind of like DAC area, I guess, where they're sorting out some stuff. We also have the incineration plant here as well, which is a nice touch. One big smokestack, not too overwhelming with that. It also produces power, much like Cities 1. Really like this asset. Yeah, big tick for me on that. And then I have also got in the recycling centre over here as well, and that looks super cool. The one issue I have with garbage is it does not seem to be a problem ever. Like, you export garbage to other cities and yeah, when your garbage fills up, it just doesn't seem to be a problem. I haven't had a single complaint about garbage the entire time building this city. And a lot of it, I didn't have any landfill at all. And then for a lot of it as well, before I put in the recycling centre and extra landfill facilities, our landfill was actually full and there were still no complaints. So garbage isn't a challenge in this game. Now let's talk quickly about communications, because I've got the server farm over here. So it can be upgraded with fibre optic cables and advanced computers. It basically helps to store some of the communications data provided by our radio masts that we have put in and telecom towers. You can see across the city I've placed in various ones and that gives us pretty decent coverage. The only effect that this really has on your city is increasing happiness. So you can see here the various different things that affect happiness ultimately. And reliable internet service is at +2 at the moment, so that's what's going to help us with that. And I think we want to keep them happy so that they stay in the city, but again, I don't know if that has any effect because we've got maximum happiness here and we've got no residential demand, so yeah. So I think we still need a bit of work to fully understand the mechanics around happiness, but it's kind of cool to see that and what is affecting it. Obviously, we've got high noise pollution. I'm not sure there's much I can really do about that. But the noise pollution mechanic is definitely not as bad as it was in CS1. In fact, you could zone industry right next to a residential house and they're not going to complain, as long as it's not a vast amount of industry at least. Now, on the other side of communications as well is post, which I didn't really talk about in the last episode. But again, I think the only thing that this really does is add to happiness. If we go back to here, reliable mail service is at +7, so people are very happy with that. We have a post sorting facility over here. And that just helps to store and process the mail, ultimately, and coming from outside of the city. We also have little post offices, which I've got one placed right in the middle here. And then you can drop in mailboxes around the place to increase your post coverage. So, like, I've actually forgotten to put one over here, so let's just plop one in there. Maybe down here as well. And that's all going to start to kind of turn green from our post coverage and have good post coverage. If I zoom in and show you one of the little post boxes, they're kind of cute. Like, I like these. Yeah. And you can see how much mail is stored in them, and that will kind of give you an idea of how many post offices you need to plop or post sorting facilities to kind of overcome that if they are stacked up. Again, it's a nice little feature to have in the city, and it's just really adding to happiness. I wouldn't say it adds a huge amount to overall gameplay, but just to have those variety and assets in there, I think is a great thing. And the post obviously we had in CS1, but the whole telecommunications towers and server farms, adding internet to your city is a whole new dynamic. So yeah, I really like that. So on to transport, and starting off with subway, which I have put in. Now, I'm only going to really talk about subway and ships, ultimately. We talked a bit about trains last time. We've got an extensive train network in now through the downtown. We've also got buses in as well, which I know others will cover. But we look at subways. We have to plop in this massive subway yard, which is kind of cool. Exactly like the rail yard, you just plop that in somewhere and that's going to service your subway trains. And of course, we've gone underground for this, but the options within subways is you do have an overground subway station. I honestly, if we just take a little look at this asset, I don't really like it very much. It's very like blocky and concrete and green. It's not the nicest looking asset in the world, I won't lie, and I wish we had raised subway stations rather than just on the ground ones, but that is what we have in the game at the moment. Also, you'll notice when I plop a building and then delete it, the trees underneath it do spawn back in, but they come back in as saplings, so you will lose all of that lovely growth that takes ages. And we have got quite a nice flourishing growth of trees in our city now that I have spammed them in and waited an awful long time. So just on the subway stations, here is one. Like, we're currently at 9:30ish at night, so it's not super busy, but they do get really busy. And I'll flash up some shots now from when it was busy back in the winter time. I took the opportunity to record a bit of footage from it. And they do get super busy, like it's a nice aesthetic. The actual asset itself is very similar to CS1, like it's just a small little square. The station actually goes underground. You connect them all up in exactly the same way and plop in your stops ultimately in the same way. But it's a very nice little aesthetic indeed, and you can hide it under highways and things like that, like I have done here. And now we come on to ships. So ships are really cool. Like, these are much better looking assets, I think, than in CS1. We've got little decks up here, so it is very much still a cruise ship. We're missing ferries quite noticeably, I think, and hopefully they will come with a DLC or update further down the line. It's a much more realistic capacity. No more like 100 or 500 or whatever. No, I don't even think it was 500 before. Can't remember off the top of my head. Yeah, 2,800 on a little cruise ship here, so I quite like that. Of course, you can put in more depots like this and have them act like ferries across your city. That's not a problem with that. You can do that. Because much like trains, you do need to put in your intercity connections. And the one thing with ships, if we go to this and have a little look at the ship lines, you do need to put in a ship line, so it does mean you need to unlock the squares, as you can kind of very faintly see that I have done here, in order to reach the shipping lane that is on the map if you want to have intercity connections. So you can't place these shipping lanes unless you own those squares. So again, you'll have to remember that to produce all of the squares all the way around the city. And then we connect in the routes exactly the same way we do with trains. Now, the other thing to note as well is to get over a shipping lane. Yeah, this looks terrible. You have to go up by a height of 50. So even at 40, I'll show you, that won't go over a shipping lane. So we go up by 50. This is the height of the bridge that you need for the ships to reliably go underneath it, which, like you'll see compared to my downtown here, looks pretty ridiculous. So bear that in mind when you're placing in shipping roads or planning to have bridges over them. You're going to need to try and incorporate that nicely somehow, because it is very, very high indeed. But you can see the height actually of our shipping container there from our cargo port, and it is needed. It is needed ultimately. And the cool thing with the cargo ships is you can see how much cargo is on them. Like, this one's empty, so there's no containers on it. We go and find another one, like this one out over here. We'll click on this. Yeah, this has got a bit of cargo on. When they fill up, they literally fill up with containers. Like, it's such a nice dynamic. I love seeing them full up. Like, you can see various different kind of fullness of different ones over here. Most of them are not very full, so we obviously don't have much goods trade going on. We've got 200 tons over here. And yeah, it's a little bit fuller than the ones that we were seeing, definitely fuller than the empty ones. So that's a super nice dynamic, that. Really, really like how they have done that. And then on the cargo port, yeah, this is it. It's a magnificent beast. You can actually also upgrade it to add in rail as well if you wanted to have that. You can upgrade it with extended warehouses to add more cargo stored, and all sorts. I think the really interesting thing is when you look at this, you can see what cargo is being stored in it. So here you go, we've got an absolute ton of stuff. So we have a massive electronics deficit. And if you come back to our cargo hub, you can see we've got 222 tons of electronics being stored here, which if we flip back to here, we've got a 387 ton deficit. So it should be more than enough to cover it, but it's unfortunate we can't really see that in the production tab. Like, why are we storing electricals here and not having it be used by our industry? I'm hoping trucks come and pick it up and take it somewhere. It doesn't make any sense. Now, someone else asked me about sports stadiums. So you will see here the large sports parks. What we do get is a community pool, a soccer field, and an American football field. If I just plop down the American football field somewhere to show you, we can see this. This is the extent of it. It's not a big stadium. It's more like a local kind of soccer field, ultimately. Or not soccer, sorry, football field with that one. This is the soccer field over here. Again, it's not a large stadium. This is more like a kind of community football ground. So actually, in reality, the biggest kind of stadium you get is with the high school. So that's something to bear in mind again when you're planning your cities, is at the moment we don't have any of those big stadiums. And then just a little nod to the community pool asset, which you can see over here. Nice and simple, nice high diving boards, but yeah, that is about it. Now, one more thing I do want to talk about is signature buildings. So you can see this one here, which is a North American. So don't forget as well, if you zone in both types, you will unlock unique buildings of both types. This is the American kind of like, yeah, mid-density building, the Polaris Suites that you can see here. And it does absolutely act as residential, and it also increases well-being within 1 kilometre. So all of these signature buildings do have some kind of benefit attached to them as well. So we've got like the Sculptor Mansion here. You can see that increases well-being. I think most of the residential is some kind of well-being increase. The one thing I would say is that some of them are pretty hard to unlock. Like, so this one, you need 200 squares of level 5 high-density building to unlock that. That is going to take a hell of a long time. Like, I've been waiting 6 months for the simulation to pass through winter of in-game time, which has taken literal days, honestly, of my time to wait through. And I don't have a single square of level 5 high density, and we've got quite a lot of high density in this city now, even if in smaller blocks rather than some of the large ones. So that is something to bear in mind. It's going to take you a long time to unlock some of these signature buildings. But also, they seem to attract a lot of sims. Like, this one has some interesting dynamics with it. Like, I don't know what is going on here, but they're literally on top of each other. Like, it's actually hilarious to watch. Like, this man doing yoga over a kid there. Like, very, very, very strange indeed. And while we're at it, if we want to get a closer look at Sims, we can go into photo mode here and you can get right down onto the ground. Let's just take a little look at them, because honestly, some of the detail on their clothing is like literally unreal. Like, you can see his like fly. In fact, you can see his abs through his top there. Like, they've gone to a lot of effort on these Sims, honestly, and on their clothing to kind of texturize them and things. Like, you can actually see the wool and the fleece on her jumper there, which is pretty incredible. But honestly, I kind of think not needed. Like, why use up so much of our simulation speed, honestly, with rendering in some like crazy details of Sims? And yeah, there's a lot of abs going on here. A lot of abs indeed. I did notice as well earlier someone with fishnet stockings, where you could actually see like incredible detail on the lace of these stockings, which was pretty unreal, but I do think unnecessary. Yeah, it's kind of funny seeing this mass gathering on the side of the building. It's a very interesting dynamic. And also, just to note, you can actually see the red and green man on the traffic lights. Like, it's incredible detail that they put into this. And the green man flashes when that time's running out. Like, that's how much detail they put into like Sims and pedestrian crossings and things like that. Really quite incredible, honestly. And when you get busier junctions, the Sims actually run over the end of the crossing to get to the other side to avoid like cars coming through when it's coming to the end of the lights, like, which is another like really super cool little feature indeed. So just to round out this burst video, you can see like we're approaching rush hour here, and this junction just gradually gets busier and busier. And that's one of my favourite aspects of the game, is the real-time nature of it, like Sims travelling to and from work, traffic building up over rush hour times, and many more Sims on the streets over the rush hour times as well. Then all kind of becomes quiet in the middle of the night. There's still activity, there's still things going on, but it's noticeably quieter than during the daytime, and particularly those rush hour times, which is a super nice dynamic. Up close and personal, the assets are really generally pretty cool. The high density commercial has a few misses in it, and some of the greyness of a lot of the assets I think needs a bit of brightening up and a bit of a colour going into it. But in general, they're really realistic. There's so much detail gone into them. It's really quite incredible. Zooming in close, like down on those street views, it really feels alive. The atmosphere is there, particularly in nighttime now with all of the lights flashing and so many elements that they've put into that. And let's not forget road tools, which are just like marked improvement. You can stack roads and networks. You're so flexible in how you place roads now and create junctions. Highways are a massive improvement. Like, everything has improved really about the road tools once you get the hang of using them and the best ways to kind of do that. They really are superb. However, even though there's a lot to like, there is a lot that I think is wrong with this, and a lot more that we can talk about after the embargo lifts ahead of release. Because yes, there's some super cool things about the game, but there is a lot wrong. Like the things that I have already talked about, the industry, such a mess. They've come up with such a cool concept, yet not executed it well at all. And it really doesn't feel realistic when you compare it to things like how they've developed a lot of these high density assets in particular. The Sims as well, an awful lot of time and effort has gone into putting like intricate lace stockings and underwear on them. Like, I just don't care about that. No one's going to look at that. Like, I don't know why they've done it, unless it is some kind of like hybrid of Life by You integration that we've got coming further down the line. But even then, their faces aren't perfect and there's a lot wrong with them. But like, there's just so much detail on them, I don't understand the need for it, honestly. A lot of the game mechanics don't make any sense, I'll be honest. I mean, I've got 100 hours in this game now. I've been trying to figure it out for that entire time and I've got literally nowhere with it. And yes, I've had several updates over that time, so maybe it will settle down on release and there will be kind of a clear, obvious way to how residential demand works, for example, demand for jobs, for things like the production chains as well, and ways to control that, because at the moment it just doesn't appear to be there to me. But in general, even despite the really good things about this game, I really feel like it's not quite ready for release. I feel like it's a bit of a disappointment coming out of CS1 into this, and I know we're not comparing to fully fledged CS1, obviously there's DLCs and things that will come into this, but there's just a lot wrong right now, and we'll go into more detail on that once the embargo lifts and we can just have a free and honest open discussion about everything relating to this game. But that is going to be all from me from this City Skylines 2 early access look. We'd love to hear your opinions of what you've seen so far, what you're most looking forward to, and maybe the things that you don't like as well. Please do let me know in the comments below. And if you have enjoyed the video, please do drop me a like, a share, subscribe to the channel. It all really greatly helps. But that's all from me for now, so thank you so much for tuning in, and I will catch you again in the future. Bye bye.